Will you have playoff games where you determine seeding based on win percentage? All of those things, Shireen, will be handled by the commissioner with the advice of that advisory committee, that outside committee. Champ Bailey, Isaac Bruce, Charlie Casserly, Tom Coughlin, Marvin Lewis, Troy Polamalu, Bill Polian, and Rick Smith. And, the reaction I saw last night on social media, not that we ever should pay attention to any reaction on social media at any time, but I'm going to go ahead and pay attention to this one. People were saying, well, where are the doctors? Where are the epidemiologists? They're missing the point here. This isn't advice for how to deal with the pandemic. This is advice for how to deal with the competitive issues relating to football that the pandemic may cause. Not from the standpoint of controlling the virus or limiting the spread, but from the standpoint of this team has X number of players who aren't available this week. Should we expect them to go forward? Is there another way to handle this, up to and including how do we handle playoff seeding if some teams don't play all 16 games? That's what they're there for. So this isn't a medical group. This is a football group that is there to deal with football issues, because there's an acknowledgement the competition committee has obvious conflicts of interest, because these decisions are going to affect their teams directly or indirectly once we get into the season, when we're talking about who has to play, who doesn't have to play, who gets to the playoffs, who doesn't get to the playoffs. Every member of the competition committee is going to have an obvious bias when it comes to that, so they've created this separate committee. And I don't have a problem with it conceptually, Shireen. I wish there was a rule book that would apply. That's what I want, because I don't know how this is going to play out in practice, and I don't think anybody does.
Yeah, I don't think they know how it's going to play out in practice. I do think they're following baseball and what's going on there with some games postponed, and I do think they are planning for the plan B if that happens in football. What if a team can't play that week or for 2 weeks or for however long it is? I do think they have a plan in place. There is a playbook there. Will they follow it? This committee's good. I do wonder how many people Roger Goodell asked, but that said no, that wouldn't do it. I mean, I would think that you would want a Peyton Manning and a Tony Dungy on that committee. Did he ask them to be on the committee? We don't know. We don't know how many people were asked and how many turned it down and maybe didn't want to do it. But this is a good thing, I think, for the NFL, that we don't have the conflict of interest. It's almost like a competition committee of outsiders that are going to decide things for the NFL and minus all the competitive things that would go on within the competition committee. This is going to be good, I think, for Roger Goodell to consult with these guys who have been in the game and know the game very well.
And look, as Chris and I argued yesterday, there still is an extent of potential conflict of interest, because these individuals at some level or another have friendships from when they were in the league, have enemies from when they were in the league. They have people they like, people they don't like. And you never know who's thinking about maybe a path back. So you want someone who can set all of that aside. It's the jury pool. That's what they ultimately need. People who have no bias, no interest. And it's impossible to get to that point, because if you find 8 people like that, they don't know anything about football. They're not connected to the sport at all. They're just random people you find on the street, and that's not going to do the commissioner any good when it's time to make these tough decisions. And ultimately, the commissioner is going to be making the decisions. I like the fact that it's a blend of players, coaches, and general managers. And you mentioned Peyton Manning. You mentioned Tony Dungy. I think Peyton Manning would have been a perfect person to add here. I just wonder, because there's that sense he's definitely going to get in at some point, and the universe of teams that maybe he would end up with, I think people on the inside know the candidates for where he potentially could go. I wonder if that, in a roundabout way, made it awkward, because even though he's not currently with a team, there may be teams that he would be subconsciously, not deliberately, favoring or disfavoring. You can't completely wipe that away. That's one of my concerns, and just hopefully everyone acknowledges that, and the commissioner acknowledges that when it's time to make these decisions, because that is the one thing that just still, that combined with the lack of clear standards, still kind of gnaws at me.
Well, ultimately, Roger Goodell's going to be blamed for whatever happens, or credited, frankly, for that matter, too, although he's not credited for much, but he is blamed for a lot. But whatever happens, it is his decision. He's just leaning on these people to see what they think. And he may go against the committee. Who knows when it comes down to it. But there are going to be some hard decisions to make here. There are going to be teams that test positive for COVID, that have a number of players test positive for COVID. There are going to be quarterbacks who test positive for COVID. We know that is likely to happen, and they're going to be hard decisions to make. He has this committee to consult. Ultimately, it is his decision to make. And there'll be tough decisions. And the game probably will go on, maybe with or without a game that week. But I think, the goal obviously is to get through a complete and full season, and we'll see if they're able to do that. Baseball was not able to do that, has not been able to do that. And I think baseball, they've had a pretty good couple of weeks here, but I think they're only a handful of games more from shutting this thing down if it continues to have games canceled and postponed.
Shireen, I'm curious for your thoughts on this, because Sims and I have been talking about it, discussing it, and I've come around to Chris's way of thinking. Football, in my mind, is the ultimate next man up sport. We've never talked about possibly postponing a game based upon the fact that a team has too many injuries. You get somebody elevated from the practice squad, you sign someone off the street, you make your plans, you set up your roster accordingly. Especially this year, there's going to be a premium on players who can do multiple things. You can play offensive line, you can play defensive line if need be. I mean, it's Bill Belichick's dream. I got a receiver who can play corner. I got a safety who can play running back. I got all these guys who can just be football players. I think that the attitude should be, it's on you to keep your guys healthy. It's on you to have 46 guys in uniform ready to go. You've got 69 guys between the active roster and the practice squad, so you can withstand an outbreak, and it's on you to ensure that you're ready. So, look, I understand that they don't want to just have forfeits and have to rebate money to the networks because there's no game to televise on a Sunday night or a Monday night or a Thursday night or a Sunday at 4:25 p.m. Eastern for what is one of the bigger games of the week. But I think there's something very simple and very powerful in taking the position that for all 32 teams, you're expected to have 46 guys healthy every week, and it's on you to make sure it happens.
I think there's two things that I agree with you. It is a next man up sport. We hear that cliche all the time. But I think there's two things that would lead to postponed games. One is the quarterback position. If you have your room full of quarterbacks and you do not have a legitimate quarterback to start a game, I think you seriously have to consider that a team would postpone that game. If it's, say, I assume every team's going to carry at least 3 quarterbacks this year. I think you have to. We see a lot of teams normally go to that 2 quarterbacks. We're going to save the roster position. This year, I'm pretty sure every team's going to have 3 quarterbacks. Maybe they quarantine that third guy. If you have that third quarterback, maybe this committee and Roger Goodell say, okay, go ahead. You're going to have to play with your third quarterback. Good luck to you. But if you get your quarterbacks all hurt and you're having to bring or injured and COVID or whatever the case may be, and you have to bring in a 4th quarterback from outside, I think that's when you have to think about it. And the other thing is if you have a cluster of cases within the offensive line, because then I think you start worrying about injuries to the quarterback, injuries to the running backs, big type injuries that we could see in the game if you can't have a decent offensive line out there. Now, they're going to have probably 10 offensive linemen, so they should be able to put an offensive line out there. But say you get 6 cases, 7 cases within your offensive line, in that offensive line room, then I think you have to start thinking about postponing the game. But to me, those are the only 2 things that I would think about postponing a game for. Not a legitimate quarterback starting, you're bringing somebody in from outside, or the offensive line really has a cluster of cases in a week.
Yeah, God forbid somebody'd have to sign Colin Kaepernick this year. That would be a shame if it came down to that. But Shireen, to get back to the point we were making earlier about how linear coaches are in there, here's where I am, here's where I need to be, what do I need to do to get there? You tell them going in, hey, you got to have 46 people ready. It's up to them to say, well, I better make sure I keep my quarterbacks apart. I better make sure that the offensive line is – I think it's just easier and it's cleaner to just put it on the teams. But apparently that's not going to be the case. There's going to be that escape hatch if need be, but we don't know what the standards will be. We don't know what the rules will be, and we won't know anything about how that actually operates until it does.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights From NBC Sports.